My name is Claire Archer. I'm 29 years old. On the evening of my convocation from Toronto Metropolitan University, my father stood up at the dinner table in front of 43 relatives and family friends, tapped the side of his wine glass with a butter knife, and cleared his throat. The toast was not for me. He talked for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. I counted. He talked about my brother Ryan's new position at a software engineering firm in downtown Toronto, the starting salary, the signing bonus, the team he'd be leading. He talked about how proud he was, how Ryan had always known exactly what he wanted, and gone after it. He talked about the future like it was a hallway Ryan was already walking down, every door open. Then he looked at me across the table, and smiled the smile I had known my whole life. The one that meant he had remembered, at the last moment, that I existed. And of course, Claire finished her design program today, he said. A pause. Graphic arts. Should be useful for making birthday cards, right? Laughter. 12 people. I counted those too. My mother smiled into her wine glass. My brother glanced down at his plate. We're proud of you, honey. We just hope you find something practical soon. I didn't cry. I didn't leave the table. I smiled because I had been practicing that smile since I was 9 years old, and by then I had it perfect. They think I left because I had nothing. They didn't know I left because I had finally run out of reasons to stay. 6 years later, my mother sent my brother's wife to find me. What Lindsay uncovered made my parents understand, far too late, that the story they had been telling themselves about our family was built entirely on lies. Let me go back to where it actually started. Not the convocation dinner. Earlier than that. The moment I understood what I was worth to them, measured against what Ryan was worth, and found out the number was very small. I was 11. Ryan was 14. It was a Saturday in late March, snow still on the ground in Oakville, the kind of wet gray that lasts all the way into April in Ontario. I'd spent 3 weeks working on a poster for a community art competition. The public library was running, painted it on Bristol board with acrylic, a blue heron standing at the edge of Lake Ontario, the CN Tower blurred in the background like a memory. I won second place. The prize was a $20 gift card to Chapters, and a certificate with my name printed on it in a font that was trying too hard. I brought both home and set them on the kitchen counter next to my father's coffee mug so he would see them when he came downstairs. He came downstairs. He moved the certificate aside to reach the coffee maker. He said, "That's great, sweetie," without looking at it. That same afternoon, Ryan came home from a hockey tournament his team had lost, and my father spent 40 minutes on the kitchen floor with him going over plays on a whiteboard. Why the loss wasn't Ryan's fault. What the coach had done wrong. How Ryan had been the best player on the ice, even when the score didn't reflect it. I threw away the certificate that night. I kept the gift card. I bought a book about typography. I learned early that effort, in our house, was a currency that only worked in one direction. Ryan got a car for his 17th birthday. A used Civic, but a Civic, with working heat and a functioning stereo. I got told I could use our mother's Corolla on weekends if I asked in advance and didn't need it for more than 2 hours. Ryan's university applications were reviewed by both parents and a private counselor. They paid $400 an hour. When I applied to the graphic communications program at what was then Ryerson, my mother said, "That should be fine, Claire. Not everyone needs to go to Waterloo." I got in. I told no one at school, because I didn't want to explain why my parents weren't more excited. 4 years. I worked 22 hours a week at a print shop on Queen Street West. I took out a student line of credit. I graduated with a 3.8 gigapascals, a portfolio that one of my professors called the strongest she'd seen in 5 years, and $64,000 in debt. Ryan graduated from his engineering program with 0 debt, a co-op placement that turned into a full-time offer, and a dinner where 43 people toasted his future, while I sat at the far end of the table and memorized every face that laughed at the birthday card joke. That night, I went back to my apartment near Kensington Market, sat on the floor, and opened my laptop. I didn't cry. I created a new email address. C. Archer. Studio. @gmail.com. Then I started searching. Freelance brand design Canada, remote creative work, how to register a sole proprietorship in BC. I opened a spreadsheet and wrote down every dollar I had. Savings from the print shop job, leftover student funds, a small bursary I hadn't fully spent. $4,280. I calculated how long that would last in Vancouver, which I had looked at twice on a map, and decided was far enough. I booked a one-way ticket on WestJet, $212. I didn't tell my parents I was leaving. My mother texted me 3 days later, not to ask where I was or whether I'd arrived safely, but to ask if I had returned the spare key to their Oakville house. I typed back, yes. She replied, okay, great. Vancouver in October is gray and green, and wet in a way that feels completely different from Ontario gray. Ontario gray is flat. Vancouver gray has depth. I found a basement suite in Mount Pleasant for $1,350 a month through a Facebook group. Small, low ceilings, a window at ground level that looked out at a strip of garden. I bought a used desk from a thrift shop on Main Street and set my monitor on it and got to work. I registered as a sole proprietor under the name North Form Studio. I told no one at home. The first month, I made just under $1,100, barely rent. I ate a lot of eggs and rice and walked everywhere. The second month I made $1,800. By the following spring I was clearing $4,200 a month from brand identity projects, logo packages, and a small retainer with a coffee roasting company in East Van that needed everything from their bag design to their website typography, rebuilt from the ground up. Ryan called twice in the first year. Both times I picked up, kept it short, said I was busy, said I'd call back. I never called back. I wasn't angry at him exactly. I was protecting myself from the version of myself that appeared when I talked to anyone from that life. The one who was still trying to earn something that was never going to be given. My brother's wife Lindsay called me once, about 8 months after I'd moved. We had met only a few times, at Christmas, at a birthday dinner. She seemed kind in a quiet way. She left a voicemail. Hey Claire, it's Lindsay. Ryan's new girlfriend. We met at his birthday thing last year. Just wanted to say hi, and hope you're doing well out there. Ryan mentions you sometimes. I hope things are good. I listened to it 3 times. I didn't call back. I saved it in a folder on my desktop I had labeled Archives. I didn't know yet why that would matter. March 4th, 2021. I remember the date because I had just signed my largest contract to that point, a full brand overhaul for a Vancouver-based wellness company, $14,500 CAD. I was sitting at my desk with a coffee from the shop down the street when my phone rang. Ontario area code I didn't recognize. I answered because I thought it might be a client referral. It was my father. His voice was controlled in the way voices get when someone has been practicing what they're going to say. Claire, thank God you picked up. He said he'd been trying to reach me. Said my mother had been worried sick. Said they'd tried everything. I held the phone very still. I said nothing. Ryan is in trouble, he said. A workplace accident. A piece of equipment failed, hit his shoulder. He's been off work for 8 weeks. OHIP covered the hospital visit, but not the ongoing treatment. The physiotherapy alone is $300 a session, and he needs it twice a week for at least 6 months. He can't use his short-term disability anymore because the insurance company found a technicality in his policy. Claire, we've used everything we had. We need $22,000. I heard my mother in the background. Not words, just presence. My father's voice shifted, just slightly. You've been saving up out there, haven't you? We're your family, Claire. He's your brother. This is the kind of thing families do for each other. He needs surgery on that shoulder if this isn't treated properly. He could lose function. You understand? We'll pay you back. Every dollar. We promise you. I looked at my bank account on the second monitor. $41,000. Every cent I had built from nothing in that basement suite. I said, Dad, I don't know if he said, very quietly. Claire, he's your brother. What kind of person walks away from their family when they actually need something? I wired the money the next morning. $22,000. Gone in 11 seconds. I had $19,000 left. On March 9th, I texted my father. How's Ryan doing? The message sat unread for 6 hours. Then it disappeared. Delivered turned to nothing. I called. Straight to voicemail. Called my mother. Voicemail. Tried Ryan's number. It rang once and cut off. I opened a new note on my desktop. I saved the wire transfer confirmation. I screenshot every text going green. I saved the voicemail from my father. The one where he had said surgery, said permanent damage, said what kind of person. I labeled the folder. Evidence. I sat on the floor of my apartment for a long time that evening. Not crying, just sitting. Then I got up, made tea, and went back to work. Because that was the only thing in my life that made complete sense. I changed my phone number 2 weeks later. I didn't give the new one to my parents. I didn't give it to Ryan. I did, after some thought, email it to Lindsay. I didn't explain why. I just sent a short message. New number. Hope you're well. She replied within an hour. Thanks for this. Take care of yourself out there. I don't know exactly why I sent it to her. Maybe I just wanted one thread to remain. Something so thin it couldn't be used to pull me backward. I worked like someone who had been told their whole life that what they built wasn't worth anything, and had decided to find out if that was true. 2021. North Form Studio revenue, $67,000. 2022. $118,000. That year, I incorporated properly, moved from sole proprietor to a registered corporation, hired a bookkeeper, and took on my first junior designer on contract. I moved to a proper one-bedroom apartment on Commercial Drive, plants on the windowsill, a separate room for my home office. I went from charging $3,500 for a brand package to $12,000. Clients started finding me through referrals alone. 2023. $310,000 in revenue. I hired 2 full-time employees and 3 contractors. We took on a project for a national outdoor apparel brand headquartered in Calgary that ran on billboards from Halifax to Victoria. I saw our work on the side of a bus on Granville Street and stood there in the rain looking at it for 2 full minutes. 2024. $680,000. I rebranded the studio formally. North Form Creative Incorporated. A team of 8. Office space in a shared studio building near Olympic Village. I hired a business development manager, a project coordinator, and a brand strategist fresh out of Emily Carr. I brought on a Toronto-based lawyer named Priya to handle contracts and IP. She had a reputation for being thorough, direct, and completely unafraid of difficult conversations. I still had not spoken to my parents. I had not spoken to Ryan. My name publicly was C. Archer. The company name was North Form. No one in my professional world connected me to anything in Oakville. Lindsay texted twice over the years. Once to say she and Ryan had gotten married, and that she was sorry I hadn't been invited, that it had all been very small and quick. Once to say she hoped I was well, and that she thought about me sometimes. I replied both times with a sentence or two. Nothing that opened a door, nothing that closed it completely. July 11th, 2025. A Friday. I was finishing edits on a pitch deck when my phone rang. Lindsay, I answered. She said, Claire, I need to talk to you. Her voice was different from the voicemails, something tight in it. Are you somewhere you can talk? I said yes. I closed my laptop. Your mom called me, she said. 3 times this week. She says they've been trying to reach you for years, and that you cut off the whole family without explanation. She says they're struggling, and they just want to hear from you. I was very quiet for a moment. Did she tell you why they think I stopped responding? Lindsay paused. She said you had some disagreement after you moved, that you were going through a hard time and pushed everyone away. I said, in March 2021, your in-laws called me and told me Ryan had been seriously injured at work. They said he needed $22,000 for surgery and rehabilitation. They said OHIP wouldn't cover it, and his insurance had lapsed. I wired them $22,000 the next morning. 2 days later, they blocked me on everything. Complete silence. They blocked you, she repeated. Yes, she said, slowly. Claire. Ryan wasn't injured in 2021. He wasn't off work in March 2021. He was promoted in February, and we celebrated at a restaurant in March. I have the photos. He has never had a shoulder injury requiring surgery. I said, I know. I heard her breathing. Then she said, they used his name. Yes, she said. I need to see what you have. I said, come to Vancouver. She was there 4 days later. We met at a coffee shop on Main Street, a Tuesday morning. She looked the same as I remembered. A little older, dark circles she hadn't had before. She sat down, and I pushed my laptop across the table before she could say anything. I showed her the wire transfer confirmation. TD Bank, March 9th, 2021. $22,000. Sent to an account in my father's name. I showed her the screenshots of the text turning green. I played her the voicemail, my father's voice, surgery, permanent damage. What kind of person? I showed her the folder I had kept since that morning, in March 2021, every piece of it. Lindsay listened to the voicemail twice. When it finished, she didn't say anything for almost a minute. Then she said, very quietly, they used him as a prop. They used Ryan's name to take money from you. I said yes. She said, does Ryan know? I said, I don't know. I hope not. But I don't know. She looked out the window. I need to find out. She pulled out her own phone. I'm looking at our March 2021 calendar right now. Ryan was at work every day that month. He had a team offsites. I can see the calendar invites. He was not injured. There was no insurance claim, no physio appointments, nothing. She turned the screen to face me. I photographed it without asking. I saved it in the folder. Lindsay spent 2 days in Vancouver. She stayed at a hotel on Robson Street, $189 a night, and we met twice more. She was a marketing director at a mid-size agency in Toronto, the same agency that, as she quietly mentioned on the second day, had recently been contracted to support a brand campaign for one of my studio's long-term clients. She had seen Northform Creative's work. She had admired it for months without knowing who was behind it. She found out when she saw the corporate registration on a shared contract document. Northform Creative Incorporated, founder C. Archer. She looked it up. Industry profiles. Agency listings. 8 employees, 6-figure client roster, billings well into the mid-7 figures. Claire, she said. Your parents don't know any of this, do they? They know nothing, I said. She was quiet. Then, this is about to become a problem, I said. I know. That's why I need you to let me know if they try to reach you again. Because when people are desperate, they escalate. Lindsay looked at me for a long moment. Are you recording this conversation? I said. No. Should I be? She thought about it. Maybe yes, she said. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table. We started over. She drove back to Toronto on July 15th. On July 18th, she texted me. Talk to Ryan. He knew nothing. He is devastated. He wants to call you. I replied, not yet. She replied, okay, I'll handle it. She dug. Over the next 3 weeks, she made calls, pulled records, had quiet conversations with a family friend from Oakville who had stayed in touch with my parents over the years. She built the picture from the outside in, the way a forensic accountant would, careful and systematic. On August 2nd, she sent me a long email. Claire, here is what I found. Your parents refinanced their Oakville house in 2019, again in 2022. Current mortgage outstanding, approximately $389,000. Estimated home value based on comparable sales, $365,000. They are underwater. Your father was let go from his logistics manager position in 2023. He now works part-time at a building supply store, roughly $19 an hour. Credit card debt across 2 cards, estimated $34,000. There's a collections notice from 2024 that Ryan saw but didn't fully understand. They owe money to at least one private lender, amount unclear. Total estimated debt somewhere north of $110,000. They are not managing. They are drowning. I read the email twice. Then I replied, "That is not my problem." But I knew what was coming. August 19th, 2025. My father emailed me for the first time in 4 years. He had found my business email through the Northform website, the general contact form. He did not introduce himself. He wrote, "We know about the company. We know what you've built. You are our daughter, and we are in serious financial difficulty. We are not asking for charity. We are asking for what any child owes their parents. We need $85,000 to resolve immediate debts. We expect to hear from you by the end of the month. No greeting, no apology, no mention of the $22,000. Just the number." My mother called the business line the same day and left a voicemail with the receptionist. I listened to the recording. "Hello, this is Margaret. I'm calling for C. Archer. It's a personal family matter. Please have her call back." Her voice was smooth, polished, practiced. I forwarded everything to Priya within the hour. Priya called me back in 20 minutes. "This email is extortion," she said, very calmly. "Under the Criminal Code of Canada, Section 346, this qualifies. Combined with the original wire transfer, you have fraud. Combined with the threat of what exactly did they say they would do if you don't pay?" I said, "The email doesn't specify, but I know the pattern." She said, "Let's get ahead of it then." She didn't have to wait long. On August 22nd, my mother left a voicemail on my personal cell, the number I had never given them, which meant they had found it another way. Her voice this time was not polished. It was hard. "Claire, we know everything. $7.5 million, and you've been hiding it while your father and I lose everything. We gave you everything, and this is how you treat us. If you don't call us back by Friday, we are going to contact every single person you work with, your employees, your clients. We'll tell them exactly what kind of person you are. A daughter who abandoned her family, who stole from us, who built a fortune on lies. You have until Friday." I saved the voicemail, forwarded it to Priya, forwarded it to Lindsay. Lindsay called me immediately. "That's a threat, Claire. That's actual extortion on a recorded line." "I know," I said. She said, "Are you ready to end this?" I said, "I've been ready since March 2021. On August 25th, Priya sent the package via registered mail to my parents' Oakville address and by email to the address my father had used. 51 pages. Pages 1 to 4, the 2021 fraud. Wire transfer documentation. Voice recording transcription. My father's exact words. The evidence that Ryan was never injured, never off work, never in any medical situation requiring funds. Pages 5 to 14. A timeline of every contact attempt I made after the wire transfer, every blocked message, every call that went to voicemail, every avenue closed. Pages 15 to 24. Lindsay's research. Mortgage records from the Halton Region Land Registry. Credit history indicators. Employment status. The pattern of a family systematically draining resources under false pretenses. Pages 25 to 33. The August 19th email, and the August 22nd voicemail, annotated with the relevant sections of the Criminal Code. Section 346, Extortion. Section 380, Fraud over $5,000. Pages 34 to 48, Legal Analysis, Ontario Law, Federal Law. The fact that I was 23 years old at the time of the fraud, working from a basement suite, and that the $22,000 represented my entire safety net. The fact that under no Canadian legal framework does an adult child owe financial support to parents aged 61 and 59 who are not medically incapacitated. The false APS-style report risk, my father had vaguely referenced in a follow-up text Priya had caught. Pages 49 to 51. The cease and desist. The final paragraph. Any further contact with my client, her employees, her business associates, her family members, or any media or professional contacts, by any means including phone, email, post, social media, or through a third party, will result in the immediate filing of criminal extortion charges with the Halton Regional Police Service and a civil claim for damages, including the original $22,000 adjusted for 8 years of interest and opportunity cost, and additional punitive damages. You have 72 hours from the date of this letter to respond in writing, confirming your agreement to these terms. Failure to respond will be treated as non-compliance, and proceedings will begin immediately. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after Priya sent me the confirmation. Plants on the windowsill. Rain outside. Vancouver at the end of August, that particular light that is both dim and clean at the same time. 4 days went by. No contact. On the 5th day, Lindsay texted me. She said Ryan wanted to meet. She said he had been quiet for 2 weeks and had something to say. I said okay. We met at a cafe on Bloor Street when I flew to Toronto for a client meeting. Ryan was already there when I arrived. He looked older than I expected, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He stood up when I came in, and then seemed unsure what to do with his hands. I sat down. He sat down. He said, "I didn't know." I said, "I believe you." He said, "I don't know how to explain what it was like in that house when you were gone. They never said you'd blocked them. They said you'd walked away. That you'd always been angry. I believed them. I shouldn't have. I didn't say anything." He said, "I found a text message on my mom's old phone that she gave me to transfer photos from, a text from March 2021. From Dad. It said, she sent it. We're clear." I thought it was about something else. But then Lindsay explained, and I went back and looked at the date. He put his phone on the table between us. I looked at the screenshot. March 9th, 2021. 10:23 a.m. She sent it. "We're clear." I saved it. Ryan looked at his coffee. "I should have looked harder," he said. "I should have pushed harder to find you. I let them tell the story." I said, "You're here now." He looked up. "That's not enough." I said, "It's a start." We didn't hug. We didn't make promises. But we stayed at that table for an hour and 15 minutes and talked, actually talked, in a way we had not done since we were children. He showed me a photo on his phone from that month in 2021, a team photo from his company off-site. Him grinning in the back row, no sling, no injury, completely fine. I saved that too. On September 10th, 2025, Priya received an email from a family lawyer in Oakville named Douglas Parrish. It was 4 paragraphs. His clients acknowledged receipt of the letter. His clients withdrew any and all claims. His clients agreed to no further contact with me, with Lindsay, with my employees, with my clients. His clients would not be making any public statements. Priya forwarded it to me with 2 words. "It's done." I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the street. I did not feel triumphant. I felt something quieter. Like a door that had been banging in a draft for years, had finally, properly, closed. In October, I gave Lindsay the $22,000. Not as a gift, not as payment. I sat her down at my kitchen table and pushed the envelope across to her. She said, "Claire, I didn't do any of this for money." "I know," I said. "That's not what this is. They took that money in your husband's name. In his name, Lindsay. It should go back to the family it was meant for. Use it however you want. But I'm not keeping it." She started to say something. Stopped. Took the envelope. She said, "I'm proud to know you." I said, "Likewise." November brought the close of a partnership agreement. I had been quietly negotiating since spring. A collaboration with a Montreal-based design collective, that would expand North Form's capacity and bring in a projected $2.1 million in combined revenue for the following year. I signed the papers on a Wednesday afternoon at our Olympic Village office, all 8 of my staff around the table, sparkling cider in paper cups. My bookkeeper asked if I wanted to say something. I thought for a moment. I said, 8 years ago I moved here with $4,000, a used desk, and the very strong impression from the people who raised me that I wasn't built for anything serious. I'd like to formally thank them for the motivation. Everyone laughed. The papers were signed. I have not heard from my parents since the letter from Douglas Parrish. No calls, no emails, no texts through third parties. The silence that used to feel like proof of something, proof that I had never mattered enough for anyone to come looking, feels completely different now. Now it just feels like clean air. I talk to Ryan on the phone once a week. Mostly about nothing. Hockey scores. A show we're both watching. Occasionally something real. He's getting there. So am I. Lindsay came back to Vancouver in December. We walked the seawall on a Tuesday morning, cold and clear, the mountains across the water very white. We didn't talk about our parents. We didn't need to. I am 29 years old. I run a studio that employs 11 people and does work I am genuinely proud of. I have a brother who is finally learning to see me as I am. I have a sister-in-law who drove across the country on faith and helped me close a chapter that had been left open for 8 years. My parents wanted me to fail quietly somewhere far away, where it wouldn't inconvenience them. I failed to do that. I went far away. I went quiet. But quiet, it turns out, was never the same as small. And distance was never the same as gone. They told me my whole life that what I made wasn't worth anything. I kept making it anyway. That's the whole story. That's the only revenge I ever needed.